And of course, frozen toast. Moms, do mornings come too early at your house? Then frozen toast is the breakfast for you. From the freezer to the toaster, what could be simpler than frozen toast? Hit it, kids.
Frozen toast.
What do you want for breakfast, kids?
Frozen toast.
As we said earlier, it's fair season, and we sent our man on the street, Joel, out to gather some stories about the Appalachian Fair.
Well, I gotta tell you, Lori, they're celebrating the Appalachian Fair's 90th anniversary. We've been talking to folks who came here for the first time and who've been coming here for years. And one thing is clear, the fair is the place to be, and tradition is big. Not much has changed from year to year, as you know about and hear about. I've got with me some folks who want to tell you a little bit about their experience. Now, Gladys, what can you tell me about what's going on?
Well, as you might know, the Appalachian District Fair is held each year at the last of August. We always come.
And you, young man, tell me, what do you think about it?
I like the fair, but I don't like the fair.
What do you mean? I thought you loved the fair.
Well, it means school starts. Summer break is over.
Harry, you've only started kindergarten.
Hey, summer break is summer break.
Well, that is true. Even when I was young, attending the fair was the last hurrah before school started. It still is.
We would save up our money and ride all the rides.
And win prizes?
I like the popcorn.
You could see big burly farm boys with a pink poodle on their shoulder, looking for a date. It's true, that's how it was.
Some of the boys who weren't working in the tobacco patches would go to the fairgrounds a week before the fair and get jobs setting up their rides in the tents.
Well, the rides are up to much higher standards now. Back in my day, if the people who rode the rides back then knew the people who helped set them up, they wouldn't have even stood near those rides, let alone ride them.
I used to help set up those rides.
My point exactly.
But we were always excited to see the new rides.
And if the Ferris wheel was any bigger than the one last year.
And I like to hear the good music.
Weeks before the fair, homemakers were working on their entries. There were quilts, needlework, artwork, canned goods, baked goods, knitting, embroidery, and other crafts on display for ribbons and cash prizes. Gardeners were keeping their eyes on the gardens for the vegetable or crop that might win.
The fair was for city folk and country folk alike. Everyone could enjoy the displays, the rides, the corn dogs, the funnel cakes, and the sideshows.
There were bearded ladies and snake women and tattooed men and fortune tellers.
There was quality entertainment brought by the fair committee in the form of popular singing groups.
And there was the entertainment provided by the carnival, some of which was not appropriate for all ages, or not really appropriate to say about here. I'll just say there was always a tent back at the back corner of the lot that opened after dark. The carny barkers would bring beautiful girls out to display. Lawsy, I had some people say they were hoochie coochie girls.
And that show would usually last 3 or 4 nights before they were shut down by the law.
Or the Housewives of Johnson City.
Ooh, the Housewives of Johnson City. I'd watch that.
Not that episode you wouldn't.
Yep, it sounded like the fair had something for everyone. Lori, I'm going to walk over to the folks cleaning up the stall area. I'll report back soon. This is Joel at the fair signing out.
Thanks, Joel. Now let's go
Yeah,
to...
Lori, here's what I found out from Hank here. The Appalachian District Fair was the first big livestock show in the state each year. The first one.
Statewide? And it happened in Gray?
You bet your sweet Bippy it did. Livestock breeders would use Gray as a testing ground to see what animals they would enter in the Knoxville and Nashville fairs that would soon follow. I've got a couple of ladies here who had families in those early livestock shows.
I beg your pardon?
The families had livestock in those shows. And I'd never call you ladies cows.
I should hope not.
Anyway, the big statewide show started here, and it was a big, big deal back in 1965. What can you tell me about those days when you and your husband were involved?
Well, it really was a big deal when Hank and I first started. It wasn't unusual for the women of Gray, or for any of the winners of the Gray Fair, to do well in state and national competitions. There was also good prize money for the top 3 places in each class. A good show string would pay the way financially.
WJHL-TV picked up on the quality of the livestock and the expert showmanship of each breed. They set aside time on their primetime news to show off the winners of the previous day's show. At 6:15, there was the Parade of Champions.
Herdsmen would lead each class champion past the TV host and tell the results on live TV.
Like the Olympics for animals.
Olympics for animals? You ain't from around here, are you?
My husband showed animals, and he'd practice in front of the mirror saying things like, "From Valley View Farms, winner of the Junior Yearling Angus class."
They were so serious about it, they wanted to sound good on TV, thinking the whole world was watching.
To an outsider, it sounds a bit odd.
Everyone took it seriously as the cattle growers and the news people showed off the best of the best. What could possibly go wrong?
I hate it when he says that. What could go wrong? Ugh. Have you ever met Bugger Bill Shipley?
Well, I guess everyone knows Bugger Bill.
Well, I don't. So tell me about him.
When there was an explosion at school, like a cherry bomb in the dumpster, the firefighters would look for the fire while the faculty looked for Bugger Bill.
When someone's underwear was flying up the flagpole at school, the faculty looked for Bugger Bill.
When a possum walked across the stage during an assembly program, the faculty looked for Bugger Bill. He always had an alibi, but everyone knew he had something to do with it. Well, it was Friday night at the fair, in time for the Angus to march through the Parade of Champions. The herdsmen had their winners washed and groomed with show halters, and the herdsmen were cleaned up with their best boots and cowboy shirts and best pair of jeans.
I was at home. I fixed dinner early that evening to watch TV to see the winners.
Oh, and it was special this year. During the 1965 fair, we had a color TV to watch the winners.
They were lined up, youngest winner to oldest, with the Grand Champion Angus female and the Grand Champion Angus male at the end of the line.
David Holly was leading the Dyer Farms Grand Champion female, and behind him was Bobby Beaver, leading the Kefauver Brothers Grand Champion male. The atmosphere was tense and exciting. The parade began. Nobody was even thinking about Bugger Bill. Out behind the grandstands at the Gray Fair were the tie-outs for the cattle, where they were tied overnight when the barns emptied of visitors. The pedigreed animals were washed and groomed and brought to the barn each morning. There were a few nurse cows that were left hidden behind the bleachers, never cleaned, not purebred, but who gave a lot of milk. The Kefauver brothers had a scraggly cross between a Holstein and a Guernsey with a little Brahma in the mix. And I hate to say a cow is ugly, but this one wasn't a bit pretty. Bugger Bill said they had to breed her to a bull, and that was blind.
Oh, you're just making stuff up now.
I am not. I saw that cow. That cow was ugly. That cow was uglier than 40 acres of burnt tree stump. She had cow manure on her from her head to her tail, and one of her horns was pointing up and the other one down. Well, okay, it was pointing a little sideways, but you get the idea. She was still a mess. Bugger Bill, dressed in bib overalls, and put a rope halter on this nurse cow and walked her to the end of the line in the parade of champions without anyone even noticing. In fact, he strolled right up with that ugly, manure-covered, crooked, horned nurse cow and put her right between the grand champion Angus female and the grand champion Angus male.
I watched as my husband led his animal to the camera so he could say the words he'd been practicing all week long.
From Dyer Farms, this is the grand champion Angus female.
But before he could, and before anyone could stop it, here comes Bugger Bill, right in front of the camera with that ugly nurse cow.
From Possum Holler, this is the grand champion Scottish Highlander female.
And there, on the color television, that nurse cow belched in front of the camera. And there was a close-up on her crooked horns with the manure stuck on the end.
By then, everyone from the barns were yelling, cheering, and clapping. The announcer got tickled and liked to have never got through the introduction of the actual grand champion.
And even when he did, there was so much ruckus from people still laughing at the belching cow. Not too many people even heard my husband announce his winning heifer. I'm so glad there's no such thing as YouTube back then. He'd like to have never lived it down happening just that one time. I can't imagine what it would be like having something like that go viral.
Yeah, well, maybe. I do wish I could have had my moment on the television. But wouldn't the world be a dull place if it didn't have a few Bugger Bills in it?
Sounds like an interesting character.
I got another Bugger Bill story. During the fair, nights in the cattle barn were pretty boring when you weren't showing your cattle. To liven things up, we'd pull a trick on the visitors to the Angus barn. Now, being around cattle your whole life, you pick up on their patterns. We know that after they ate, cattle would stand for a while, then lay down for a long time and would not get up for anything. We had this big old bull at the end of the line, and right before he laid down, we put this pair of jeans and boots stuffed with straw right under his behind. When the bull lay down, it looked like it was laying on top of someone. Once the stage was set, we'd find our mark in the crowd. We'd ask them to keep an eye on the bulls for us while we did something, giving them instructions to walk past each one and make sure they were still tied up. We acted like we walked off, but really, we were hiding on the side of the tent. Then we'd wait for the reaction. It's really not something you wanted to do to the faint of heart. By the time they made it to the big bull at the end, there'd be a moment of silence, usually followed by a scream. One lady fainted. Come to think of it, one man fainted. We laughed so hard, we almost got found out by the Blunt-Bill basketball coach when he went in and actually tried to lift the bull off the dummy. One time, we pulled this stunt, we did get in trouble because the person who saw it ran fast to get law enforcement. But usually, we'd keep that from happening by making an appearance just after the scream. They'd point to the pair of legs sticking out from that old bull and we'd just tell them, oh, that's just Bugger Bill, pressing his shirt.
Thank you, sir, for that interesting story. Lori, there certainly are lots of stories here. Let's see if we can get one that isn't about Bugger Bill. Here's a fine-looking lady with a cute dog. What kind of dog is that? I've never seen anything like it.
Oh, she's a new breed. She's a Pikachu.
Beg pardon? Aren't you a little old to be playing Pokemon Go?
Playing what? Youngin', I'll have you to know this is a rare Pekingese Chihuahua. You have no idea how many people want of Pikachu.
Oh, I see. Well, Pikachu is highly desired in the gaming world, too. But never mind, I'm here as a roving reporter. The fair is now 90 years old. Do you have any memories of coming here when you were young?
Oh, do I? I'll never forget the Gray Fair Dog Show of 1964. Oh, I've always loved dogs. A lot of us young people got hired to work during the fair, and it would be money our families really needed. Daddy was a sharecropper, and that money came in so handy if the crops didn't make it that year. Our earnings would help pay off. My cousins and I all worked the fair. Back then, just like now, the fair was pretty busy for those of us who stayed the night with the livestock, like my older cousins. No matter what time you went to bed, the day shift that started at the first crow of the rooster. First, I'd hose off all the cattle that were tied outside the grandstand, then bring them into the barn to be fed. Those gigantic animals, some of them weighed a ton, were very, very gentle. There was this fella named Bugger Bill.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Oh, you know Bugger Bill?
Well, let's just say I've heard about him. Go on.
Well, he had taken a senior yearling bull named Dooley outside the show barn to the wash rack. As he was washing Dooley, he noticed that the dog show was taking place on the main stage. As Bugger Bill finished washing this big black Angus bull, the dog show was showing Labrador retrievers, black labs. Bugger Bill had an idea. He walked Dooley down to the stage and up the steps into the line of the black labs. Dooley didn't have any place else to go, so he went along just like it was a cattle show. When the labs were lined up side by side, Bugger stood Dooley with them. Ah, you should have seen him. Dooley stood as well as the show dogs. And those dogs were so good, they stood there like they weren't even fazed to have Dooley there next to them. The judges for the dog show came up behind Bugger Bill and asked him, "What are you doing?" Bugger said,
"I'm showing my Labrador Retriever."
By then there was a huge crowd and a lot of laughter. The judge asked Bugger Bill for his registration papers for the show.
"Well, if you're going to get technical about it, I'll just drop out of the conversation."
He threw the halter over Dooley's neck and slapped him on the rear, and Dooley walked off the stage, down the steps, into the barn. He didn't place at the dog show, but Dooley won the blue ribbon later that day when he stood proudly with the other black Angus cattle.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, Lori, back to you. This is Joel signing out with the Appalachian Fair Report.
Thank you, Joel. That was an illuminating report. All I can say is, it can only happen here. Something else that can only happen here is a station break. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to A Night with the Jonesborough Yarn Exchange on WETS 89.5 FM out of Johnson City.